Hello. Today I am joined by Jacob. He's a software engineer and he has a very interesting story. Started as a self taught developer, and you are now a senior software engineer at Nvidia. So, would you like to get this started by just sharing your story?
Yeah, sure. I guess I've been a software engineer. Like I've been working full time as a software engineer, I guess, for maybe 8 or 9 years now. So I kind of I don't know. But I'll go right back to the beginning, right? So as a kid, um, I always think I was quite fortunate in that, like, when I was about 10, somebody let me touch a computer, and that was kind of it. There was just like a spark, and I was like, right, I know what I'm doing. I know what my entire career is going to be. Um, I know exactly what I need to study, and I know exactly what I want to do. And I think, I feel extremely fortunate that yeah, I had that exposure, and that something just clicked for me, because I know a lot of people don't have that kind of, it takes a long time to work out where you want to be. But I think from quite a young age, I knew what I wanted to do. So kind of all the way through school from that point, I was just focused on how do I get in front of computers as much as possible? How do I, learn to write software? How do I start doing things? And I went to just like regular schools, but I had very supportive teachers and things around me that were kind of, you know, pointing me to books and giving me time to go and learn things and build things and resources. Um, the high school I went to, actually, the secondary school was it was like a technology specialist school. So they were mainly focused on like physical technologies. So, um, building things out of metal and out of wood and CAD
Mhm.
CAM type stuff. They had a bunch of like CNC machines, they had laser cutting stuff, right? The whole school was very focused on that kind of thing. And I remember, like, at that point, I was trying to learn, how do I make computers do the things that I want to do? And they ended up letting me build a full size R2D2,
Oh.
which, like, I was super lucky. I just kind of went to them with these plans that I'd found on the internet, and I was like, I want to build this thing. Can I have some wood? We built it out of wood, right? Because that was what the most of the courses covered, was how to cut wood with laser cutters and things. So I was like, right, I want to try and build this thing, and then I want to put a computer in it, and then I want to, like, write code so that it does something. And we only kind of half built the chassis, but we built it enough that it could move, and we put motors in it, and it drove along, and we put this computer in it. I think the computer was actually like a till from a supermarket,
Okay.
but it was just cheap, right? It was something that we just managed to find online, really cheap. It had Windows on, um, and so at that point was like the first time I really started learning code, was writing the code for this robot. Right? We ended up. This was kind of before, or it was around the time that Arduino and things were really becoming like a popular thing. So I had no idea that those things existed, or were kind of kicking off. So I found something that was like written in Visual Basic, some little controller board that I could control that would drive this thing forward. So I ended up learning Visual Basic kind of in my spare time at school, and the teachers were, really supportive of doing that. And that was kind of hard, but I kind of enjoyed it and knew that that was where I wanted to go. So, after that, I went on to do my A levels, and did A levels in computer science and maths and physics and stuff. Um, and I again, I was they continued with Visual Basics. We were writing more Visual Basic in classes this time, and I was kind of enjoying these things, but was struggling to actually do anything useful in that language. Right? It was all very much about scripting and maybe Excel type scripting and that kind of stuff, and kind of learning the fundamentals. But I was kind of itching to do something that I could really see like a result of. And a relative, actually, that is kind of a distant relative, but somebody I met at a wedding. Um, I said I was into software and learning things, and he was like, "Oh, you should go and learn JavaScript, and you should go and learn PHP, because those are like the thing that everybody should learn." So I, at that point, decided, okay, he must know what he's talking about. So I went and started learning those things, um, and through that, I ended up actually building websites for like little local businesses in my hometown. And I actually spent more of my time, like class time, I would be like sat in the corner working on a client project in PHP, rather than doing my coursework in Visual Basic that I should have been doing. Which, looking back, I do regret doing that now, right? But I got to the end of my A levels, and got some A levels and things. But I had this little business running, and I was like, okay, I'm already doing the thing that I want to do, right? I want to write software. I'm already writing software. People are paying me to write them software. I'm not earning very much money, but I'm happy. So I'm just going to do this. So I had got into some universities, but I deferred my placement at university and just carried on trying to build this business because I thought, well, I'm happy and I'm going to keep going down this path. So I did that for like a year. I just kind of sat in, my parents' house writing websites for people, not earning very much money, but kind of trying to build up a business. But I felt like my rate of learning had like slowed down massively. I was just sat on my own. I was building the same thing over and over. I was probably not doing it very well. I was trying to learn stuff through YouTube and online tutorials and, courses and things. But I felt like I was sat on my own too much, and I needed to be around other people that could help me learn and point me in the right directions and teach me things. So after a year of doing that, I was like, right, do I pick up this university placement, or do I go and try and work somewhere that has like an apprenticeship scheme or training scheme or something along those lines? So I did actually sit down and start going through all the university process again. But I also started applying to like loads of businesses kind of around. And I ended up getting a couple of like temp jobs. The first one was I ended up working in a software company that was building software for people, but my job was to ring up new customers and help them use the software. And I was kind of doing customer support. It was actually the company was building software for like farms and supermarkets. So like a farmer would, grow some stuff, they'd pack it onto a pallet. They would then go on the computer and type in, I have 6 pallets for Tesco, and it would print out a barcode and they'd stick it on, and then they drive it to a big warehouse, and then that would kind of get into the logistics system for the supermarket. And the supermarket would handle it from there. So I would spend all day on the phone to farmers, basically teaching them how to use this software so that they could get their deliveries into these big logistics centers. And again, I was like, I'm in the right place. I'm in a software company. I'm not writing software, and that's what I want to do. But I'm kind of I'm closer to doing this thing, and I just kept being worried that if I go to university now, I'm gonna have to wait 3 or 4 years before I actually can do this. And I was kind of really wanted to, I was so eager to get started. And so I ended up just applying for more things and applying for more things. And I ended up landing a temp job at the Met Office in the UK, right, which is like the weather forecasting government agency in the UK, it was only about 15 miles from where I lived. And the placement I got there was in the QA, the testing team, for most of their like customer facing products. And again, I was like, right, I'm still not writing software, but again, I'm in the right place. I'm now in a larger place. This is an organization of like a few thousand people. There's hundreds of software developers here. I'm going to be sat in the same room as them, and I'm going to be probably annoying them by testing their stuff and finding bugs with it. And I don't really know what I'm doing. So I'm probably going to be, raising so many bug reports, and they're like, yeah, that's not a bug. Yeah, that's not a bug. And, all those kind of things. But I did that for about a year, and I got into that organization, and they have like great training schemes and loads of processes for folks that were kind of in that position I was in, right? Oh, I don't necessarily want to go to university, but I want to do this as a career. How do I like make this route? And so I when I was in the organization, I was then just like speaking to loads of people. I was like, how do I stay? How do I become a developer? How do I because I was a temp, I think I was just on like every 30 days, like a few days before the end of my contract, they would say, oh, we need you next month. So I'd like get renewed for the next month. So like every month, right towards the end of the month, I'd be like, oh no, do I still have a job? Do I have to leave? Do I get to stay here?
Sounds
so
like a bit scary.
Yeah.
Because you're like, okay, maybe this is something I want to do, but maybe next month I don't have that job. So yeah, that must be a bit stressful.
So it was a hard year, that, and it was always in the back of my mind. It was like, oh, should I have picked up that university placement and gone, and I would at least be guaranteed 3 years of being somewhere doing something. But I kept speaking to people and being like, how do I apply for things? What's the process like? What are the interviews like? How do I fill in a job application in a way that people are gonna take me seriously and things? And I got loads of great advice from people that were, very, very nice to me there. And I ended up applying for loads of different things. And I interviewed for some and was rejected, but I was kind of like, I really want to hang on inside this organization. And I finally, while I was working on all the website stuff, right, building these PHP websites, I was ending up running them on, Linux servers, kind of as you do with those kind of websites. And I was kind of like, oh, actually, I'm really enjoying the Linux side of things. I'm enjoying managing systems and stuff. And so I ended up putting in an application to the Linux support team in that organization. And they were the team that took me, right? So I managed to get through that, and I interviewed and got the job. And so I joined the organization permanently on like a full-time contract as a junior sysadmin maintaining Linux systems. So again, I was like, I'm happy. I'm kind of I've come in through the IT side rather than the software development side, but I'm like really happy doing this stuff. I'm enjoying working with these servers. I'm employed properly, and I can learn loads from people. So I just started down that path, right? I did my certifications, like my Red Hat certifications, my Apple support certifications, like went through training and skilling up on that side. And a lot of that team's like scripts were done in Bash, or there was like a bit of Python, and I was quite into Python by that point. And so I was trying to build on top of that and learn more Python and get more involved in it. And there was a bunch of automation around the servers as well. So there was like some Red Hat automation stuff. There was Puppet. There was all these kind of tools that they were using for managing all these systems. And that kind of felt like software, right? You had all these config files. You would use Git to version control them and check them in and make pull requests. And I was kind of like getting through all of that stuff. And I was like, I do want to be a software developer. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm good at it, and I'm liking it. But I do want to be a software developer. And so after about 2.5 years, I think, of doing that job, there was like an announcement that they were starting this team. There was going to be like a research and development team for the organization, and they wanted people from all around the organization to apply, because they wanted, like, in a large organization like that, you tend to have each department is completely separate. And you have software developers sat in one room, you have ops folks sat in another room, you have all the scientists that are actually like the point of the organization sat in another room, right? And you have all these people, and they're separate, and they only communicate via support tickets and things. And so they wanted to build this like multidisciplinary team where they take somebody from each department, mix them all together in this team, and they would do innovative things, I guess. And I was kind of wanting to do more development stuff. I was still wanting to do the ops stuff. I was doing things like going to hackathons, which I hugely recommend. I feel like I've glossed over that a little bit maybe, but when I was applying for that job on the Linux team that I managed to get, in the interview, they were asking me all these things like, how much teamwork experience do you have, and how much experience do you have, right, doing this and doing that. And basically every single example I gave was not from the like temp jobs that I'd had or my working on my own experience. It was all from hackathons that I'd been to. And I kind of got embarrassed by the end of the interview. They were like, ask me another question. I was like, I'm really sorry. I'm going to give you evidence from this hackathon again. And I know it was just a weekend, but actually I feel like I was in this team of people, and we built some software and we did some awesome stuff.
But in a way, you're also working with different teams as well. So that also shows that you can adapt to different teams. So that's also a good thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, this R&D team kind of came up, and I'd been going to these hackathons and things, and they approached folks that had been going to these internal hackathons saying, oh, you might want to apply for this, and kind of signposting it for people. And I ended up applying for that and getting that. So I did like an internal transfer to this R&D team, to basically still be the sysadmin person on that R&D team. But the nature of that team and multidisciplinary teams is everybody starts sharing skills, and you work on stuff collaboratively. So I was writing more and more software and doing, working with like the software developer on the team who'd come from the software department. Like he was teaching me loads of stuff. I was teaching him sysadmin stuff. We had some scientists and mathematicians. They were like teaching. That was kind of the first point, after being in this weather organization for 3.5 years. That was the first point I started learning about how the weather really works and how they predict the weather and build these systems, because I'd only ever been supporting them. So, I was in this great team. I was learning all of these things. One of the big bits of research the team was doing was, should the organization stop managing their own data center, and should they move to cloud computing? So I spent loads of time learning AWS and working out, the team was using it kind of as a trial run to see if everybody else should use it. And so we did a bunch of stuff building big systems on AWS to kind of replicate some of the internal systems, just to see whether it would work and whether it would scale, and whether, what the the learning curve was like. And I was in that team for about 4 years altogether. And so I ended up through that kind of progressing from being a sysadmin kind of through to being a software developer that does a lot of cloud infrastructure stuff. The kind of things that maybe a solutions architect would do in an organization, where they kind of like learn problems that people are having, and then figure out, right, here's how we could design some infrastructure with a database and some web servers and some app servers, and you can connect them together like this. You get somebody to write some software like this, and here's a quick prototype that I'll throw together. And I was kind of filling that role. And a lot of one of the things that team decided early on is it was a government funded organization, and the team was explicitly being funded by the public side. Like, the organizations like that often have a public and private side. So part of the organization will take in taxpayers' money to pay for services that kind of are for the public good. So just the weather forecast that you often just see on the Met Office website, you get that for free because it's paid for by taxpayers' money, and all the weather generation is done like that. But there's also like a private side. So if you're an airport and you want something really bespoke or really specific, like, there was a product that I worked on at one point, which was for de-icing planes, right? So airports get a very specialist forecast for should we de-ice planes or not, and how much de-icer should we buy months in advance, because that. And there was similar things for like councils as well. They would buy salt for gritting the roads months in advance, and they'd be trying to work on long-term forecasts for how much salt should we stockpile as a thing. And all of those were kind of paid services, right? The airports would pay the Met Office. So that was like the private side. But the team that I was in was completely on this public side, kind of working with public services. And so we decided that all the software that we wrote would be open source. And that was awesome. I'd been playing with open source software already and kind of working on some things. And we just decided, right, everything we're going to do on GitHub. This is all research. This is all experimentation. If anybody else picks it up and uses it and turns it into a product, good for them. Hopefully people in our organization will pick it up and turn it into products, and that's good for us. And kind of had that mindset. So we worked a lot with open source software. We built a lot of open source software.
Was that how you sort of got more into open source? You said that you already were contributing or into open source.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'd already started doing some pieces. A lot of the hackathons I've been to, like some of the rules that those hackathons have, like NASA, the NASA Space Apps Challenge is the main one that I've like participated in and organized events for in the past, more recently. And one of the rules of that is, in order, like, they have judging and you can win prizes for the things you build in the hackathon. But one of the conditions of you being like eligible for a prize is that you have to open source whatever you've worked on. Right. And so I'd already kind of built some stuff and put it on GitHub, and I had kind of, shown these things. I managed to go to the Mozilla Festival a few times in London, which was like an excellent event where they were very positive about open source and, all those kind of things. And so I was kind of getting into that world and that ecosystem. So yeah, when this team said, we're starting this team, they're just going to be building open source software, I was like, oh, great, I'll go, and that's just a great opportunity for me to do more open source. There was actually another team in the organization that was doing open source quite a lot already, and they were quite public facing. So I feel like I learned quite a lot from them and the tools that they were building.
I was going to say, and that team, when you were saying that, it seems brilliant because you're all sharing the same, your skills, and you're all evolving together. It seems brilliant. And I have to say, I love that you said that you were going way back. You were in a wedding and you talked with someone, and that someone told you how you can get started. And in my case, I always wanted to do something with computers, and I always wanted to work with computers. And then my dad, he was a photographer for weddings, and I actually met someone that was he wasn't a developer. He used to build computers, and he had his own company just building desktops and things like that. And he said, okay, so if you want to get started and learning how to code, you have to install Linux. And he gave me a Linux CD, and he said, this is for free. You can get started. If you need any help, just give me a call and I can help you. And I was like, brilliant. But at the time I didn't have internet, and I was 14, so for you to look for drivers and all this stuff, it was, if you didn't have internet, it was almost impossible to get things working properly.
Yeah,
But that was also my sort of beginning on this passion to of development, you know.
yeah.
And going back to open source, you know, the first time I heard you was on that podcast that you've done when you're talking about opsdroid, and
Yeah, yeah.
you finish off the episode saying, "Well, if anyone wants to contribute, I'll be more than happy to give you a hand." Which, after the whole episode, I was like, you know, this project seems so cool. And at that time, I was already past the whole doing tutorials and more tutorials and more tutorials, and I wanted to do something with chatbots. And when I got the your interview or your episode, I was like, this is just brilliant. This is something I want to do. I remember I was in Portugal. I was on holidays, and I wrote the name, and I said, when I get home, I will look for the GitHub account. I will try, and that's how I started as well. And I have to say, you've seen me from pretty much nothing to now, and even though we don't speak that much outside opsdroid, I still kind of see you as my mentor, because the things that I've grew with, it's because of you, you know. And
Oh,
the
thank you.
whole, even just making a proper git commit. You probably remember the first time I contributed to opsdroid, it was opening lots of PRs and make a mess of the commit and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that's the beginning, right? I mean, thank you for saying all of those things. That's very kind of you. I very much enjoy working with you on opsdroid. It's been really great watching you kind of grow. I guess we're kind of getting, like, I'm kind of going through my thing in order, right? And like we're basically getting up to the opsdroid point, right? As I was working in this team, we're doing open source software stuff, and I was trying to automate a bunch of stuff because there was only like 9 of us in the group or something, and we were trying to build these big systems, and I just needed to automate things. So I was trying to do more stuff with chatbots to automate things. And I ended up in my spare time starting, like I was using Hubot, right, which was this like JavaScript, or it was a CoffeeScript implementation of a chatbot that GitHub produced. But I had a few issues with that, and I was kind of getting frustrated. I didn't like that it was in CoffeeScript. I was trying to write JavaScript for it because you could mix them, but it all the documentation was in CoffeeScript, and I just had a generally bad experience. I was writing loads of Python, and I was like, right, I'm going to build a new chatbot framework that is you know, completely written in Python, and it kind of does things the way I want. One of the things I really wanted to do is get away from people treating chatbots like a command line kind of in your chat, which is, it's a pretty standard thing, right? As you build up command line like syntax, and there are like frameworks for doing that kind of thing. But I wanted something that was like, no, I want to speak English to this thing, and I want it to understand me and do the right thing. And part of the research group was trying to understand language, because it's a big part of communicating the weather is understanding language and how people speak and interpret things. And we wanted to build chatbots for people asking what the weather was and all that kind of stuff, right? So I was getting very into these things, and I was like, right, there are open source communities that I'm part of and that I'm learning a lot from. Home Assistant is a big one, right? Which is a big home automation Python framework, which is excellent. I was like, I want to build my own thing. And I'd started loads of projects, right? I built loads of things, but I was like, right, I want to build a thing that is a piece of software, but I want it to be a community. I don't want it to be all down to me, because I'll get bored and forget about it and move on and do something else. I want other people to come and help me. So I tried to put this project together in a way where the instructions were clear on how you contribute, the issues were well written, and there's kind of a clear path. And instead of writing code, I would try and write issues and hope that somebody else would come and pick up an issue and basically do what I told them to do in the issue. But it would be, somebody would do something for me, which is useful. They would learn something, and also hopefully they would take ownership of it and look after it into the future, so that when other people find bugs, I can be like, oh, I didn't write that, somebody else wrote that. And I can kind of push that off. And so, yeah, I started doing this for a while, and I had that podcast reach out to me and say, do you want to come on and talk about opsdroid? And I was like, oh, well, I would love to talk about opsdroid. I've got all these ideas about opsdroid, but I really want to try and get across that I want people to come and join in and help me and stuff. So I did this interview. I said, I'd be really great for people to come and work. And then I think you messaged me like the next day or a few days later after it had gone out, and you kind of said something like, I heard you on the podcast. I'd really like to help. And I was like, oh, that's great. I really, really hope that this guy does do stuff. And then, you started putting in some pull requests, and I was like, this is excellent. There's room for improvement, but I also have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm trying to figure out how to run a project like this, because I've contributed to a few things.
Mm-hmm.
And there was you trying to learn how to contribute to a project like this. And I was like, oh, I feel like I can help you. I'd much rather spend my time helping you do this stuff, and then you keep doing stuff, rather than me just doing stuff on my own. And so, we've had like a bunch of back and forth on GitHub over that. And then, a few people kind of came in and were contributing, but you kept coming back, which was just like, I found that really exciting as running this project. I was like, I've hooked somebody. They're like invested in this project. They like care about this thing, in the same way that I care about this thing, and they want it to be better. And then, it's just been excellent watching you kind of grow through the various stages of running open source projects. There's a great project that my old boss, I used to work for a guy called Matt Rocklin, who used to work for Anaconda. He started Dask and a bunch of things. He's gone and started his own company now called Coiled, which is for like scaling out data science workflows using Dask, which is great. But he writes really good blog posts. And one of them that he wrote a while back was the various roles of open source, like people in open source. And he was kind of writing about contributors and reviewers and maintainers, and like the different things that each person does. And some of the like short definitions of that is contributors come along either because they want to learn something, and so they want to kind of write some code to do something for a project. They don't have their own project, they want to write something, do something, or they're a user of a project and they want something's missing or something's broken, and so they add that thing to the project, right? But contributors are generally very focused on themselves, right? They're either developing themselves and improving themselves, or they're fixing something for themselves. And that's kind of it. And that's great. We love contributors. We want lots of people to come and do that on all the projects I work on, just because then it becomes the best thing that it can be and suit people. Because, if somebody comes along and says, I want this feature, there's a good chance lots of other people want that feature as well. And if they're willing to add it, then it makes the thing more valuable. But then as you kind of get involved in a project and invested in a project, you also get folks that review, right? So they look at other people's contributions, even if they don't have like the power to do anything. They can look at other people's contributions and say, yes, that would be a good thing. We should add this. And they like add a +1 or a thumbs up kind of thing to the pull request and say, or they might say, oh, you've done something wrong here, or you could fix this here, and I think there's more chance of it getting merged if you change this, or they kind of help people along. And I think you started doing that in opsdroid pretty quickly, right? After adding your own pull requests, you kind of started speaking to other people on their pull requests and helping them. And I feel like you had the same kind of thing where you were in this position where you were trying to learn and you were trying to get started and you were trying to do stuff, and you can see these other people who were trying to do the same thing, and you'd maybe worked on a piece of code a couple of times and you knew a bit about it, and you saw somebody else do something and you were like, oh, I can help you. You're me from like 2 months ago. Let me help you do this thing, right? Yeah. And you kept doing that. So you were reviewing other people's code and things, which is great. It took some of the pressure off me in doing that kind of thing. And then I think I always wanted to get to the point where I was not the only person that could merge code into opsdroid. And so I was really on the lookout for somebody to start doing that. And I'd kind of designed things in a way that I wanted to be really strict about tests. I wanted to be really strict about coverage. I wanted to be really strict about documentation, kind of write all this up, put in CI and testing and GitHub for all of this stuff, because then I would feel more comfortable handing the reins over to somebody else. It was like, look, you can merge whatever you want as long as all these ticks go green within the project. It kind of gave me that. It was like, I can more safely hand my baby over to somebody else if I've kind of set some rules. And so, yeah, I remember saying to you, like, would you like permission? You're doing great stuff. You're kind of going on people's pull requests and saying, this is great. Like, would you like the ability to click that button as well? And, so I upgraded you to a collaborator in the project, and you've since then probably merged more pull requests than I have, basically since the day that I gave you that permission, right? especially
maybe
because you
smaller
tend to deal
ones.
with all the automated. Yeah, you tend to deal with all the automated ones, right? Like, which is excellent. But that's been really great. Watching that project grow, it's kind of helped me grow as a maintainer of this project. And it's just been excellent watching you go from somebody that accidentally opens multiple pull requests because it's not clear how to push new commits onto a branch when you're first starting, through to somebody that's like, yeah, basically every time I see somebody open multiple pull requests and you help them, it's like I feel like this has kind of come round
Yeah.
full circle, right? Like you're fixing that thing and helping folks, which is just it's just excellent.
It's funny that when you asked me if I wanted to help you with opsdroid, I think I took a good 5 minutes just looking at the message like, did he send that to me? Really? And then I was probably bouncing up and down the walls, really happy. Because like you said, I think this whole 4 years that I've been learning how to code, opsdroid is the one that I've been contributing constantly. And in a way, it's sort of like my baby as well, because I've seen that contributing was the thing that really helped me grow more and see how you write code, how other contributors write code, and learn things and say, oh, okay, I didn't know that you could do this, or I didn't know you could contribute it or write your code like this. And even with basic things like list comprehension, I never really got into that, and then I saw you use that on one of the PRs and said, oh, okay, so this is how it works. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then I remember my first Oktoberfest, I tried to contribute to different projects as well. And I remember I brought some things. One of them was the context sleep suppress to opsdroid, because we were doing a lot of try and pass. I said, hey, I just learned this cool trick from a different project. Maybe we should do the same thing in opsdroid. And you're like, yeah, that sounds good, because we will refactor the code and it will be perfect. I was like, okay, my opinion was good. All right, cool.
But that's one of those things, right? Like I also learned about context lib suppress by you asking, right? Like I hadn't really used it. I think I had seen it maybe a few times, but I hadn't really used it. And when you said we should do this, I was like, well, that's much nicer than doing try, accept, and pass.
Yeah.
You're condensing that block down, and you're kind of being more. I know Python's got the whole thing about ask forgiveness, not permission, and all of that. But with suppress, you're kind of explicitly saying, I expect this to fail. Don't worry about it if it does fail, right? And so I learned something through you learning something, which was great. But also, from my point of view, in order for you to do that, that meant that you had to go through the whole code base, find every time that I or somebody else had done, accept, pass, and replace all of those, which means your fingerprints are now all over all of this code.
Yep.
So the next time a bug comes up in this area, you know what that code is trying to do, because you've had to understand what that exception was doing.
Yep.
And so there's just kind of increasing the bus factor and increasing the knowledge in various areas of this code that I, initially wrote on my own. And so that's, from my point of view, it just makes me feel more safe, because I'm really lucky that since getting that job at the Met Office working on open source software, for the last 5 years, through into my time at Nvidia, I write open source software for a living, which I'm like really fortunate to be in that position. I'm really happy that I'm able to do that. But it means that I have less energy for my own open source projects, right? And so I work on opsdroid and other things kind of in waves, and it depends whatever my work life is doing, basically. If I'm writing loads and loads of software at work and doing things, then I'll probably do less or nothing on my like personal projects. But I have this like compulsion and need to write software. So if my work starts going in other directions, like if it's conference season and I'm starting to prepare loads of talks and spending lots of time writing abstracts and not writing so much code, more writing words, I start itching to write code. And so in the evening, I might work on opsdroid to like balance out and make sure that I've committed some stuff, because that's just what makes me happy. And so having other people involved like you means that when I when I'm busy at work doing code stuff and I completely ignore opsdroid for a few weeks or whatever, I know it's like in safe hands and somebody else is looking after it. And if people raise issues, I don't have to respond immediately and stuff, which is great.
It's funny that you say that. I remember listening to one of the podcasts many years ago. I think this was when I was starting, and one of the hosts was saying exactly what you're saying. That sometimes you feel just so mentally drained because you're working on some specific thing at work that you just want to get home, maybe put up your PS4 or whatever, and just play a game to do everything but think. And I understand that completely. Even I work as a flight attendant, so sometimes I might do a whole week of 50 something hours because I'm doing only extra long flights, and I sit down and I'm like, I really want to code, but I just don't have the energy for that anymore. And in a way, it seems that sometimes we don't work on opsdroid that much, but then someone comes in and say, oh, I want to work on this, I want to work on that. We are recently going from unit tests to PyTest, so there's a few people wanting to help, and that's great. That when we both not able to dedicate 100% to opsdroid, we know that someone at least is trying to help, so that's good. I wanted to ask you, you are also working fully remote as well.
Yep.
How does your day look like at work?
Yeah, sure. So I've been remote for the last just over a year now since I joined Nvidia, right? So one of the open source projects I was working on at the Met Office is called Dask, which was like a tool for scaling out Python. And Matt that built Dask joined Nvidia because Nvidia was starting to build software on top of Dask. And as one of the folks that was regularly contributing to Dask, they asked me to also go and join Nvidia, which was really exciting to do that. But that one of the huge factors for me was I'm going from an office. There's 2,000 people in a big building, and I'm in a team of 10, and we spend every day together. And I built some amazing friendships in that place. And being part of an institution like that, it's a bit like being part of a school. It's kind of that kind of thing, right? There's all these people, you see them every day, and so one of the big things was like, do I go and join this organization where I'm going to be sat on my own all day every day? And that was like a huge thing, and I was unsure about it, and I was talking to lots of people. I was trying to find other people that work remotely and get lots of advice and things. And ultimately I decided to join because it was like a really exciting opportunity. But it's working on my own is a challenge, and I like do certain things to try and mitigate the issues with that, right? So the way I have things at the moment, so I've got 2 small kids, which is another reason why I don't have as much time for opsdroid as I used to in open source projects. So my oldest is just coming up 2, and then my youngest is about 6 months. And so mornings are hard because they're both small and they have very different needs at the moment. So we wake up, from the moment we wake up, it's just kind of general chaos until about 9:30. And so we just deal with all of that, and then about 9:30 I can get into my office. So I'm in my office at the moment. This is where I work every day. It's actually just the back half of my garage, which we moved here a few months ago. And so I just painted everything white just to try and make it a bit nicer, but I'm going to actually do it out properly, right? But and plaster it and everything. But so I come and sit out here about 9:30. And the beginning of my day generally is catching up with everything that's happened asynchronously, because I work as part of a team that's all around the world. The bulk of my colleagues are in the US. Like about half of Nvidia staff are in California, and then the other half are kind of all around the world, either in various offices or working from home. So there's a lot of things that happen when I'm not at my desk. So I kind of get in, I have loads of emails, I have loads of Slack, I have loads of GitHub. I have to just kind of come in and absorb everything. So I kind of have like half an hour at least to just sit and absorb everything that's happened, kind of look at all my open source projects that I'm part of, like the various Dask sub-projects and things, and have a look at all the issues and PRs that have been raised, and try and catch up, so that maybe by mid-morning I'm like up to speed with what is happening and what's going on. And then in the mornings, it tends to be like my quieter time because my American colleagues have not started work yet. So there's like a few Europeans that I can speak to and things. But that's my time. That's generally like my solid focus time, where I know I'm not going to be disturbed. I know I'm not going to be interrupted. If I have like a big pull request or something that I want to work on, I'll like pick that up and put my headphones on and try and really focus on that kind of thing. Through until lunchtime, and then I tend to try. I make a point of leaving my office for like a good hour at lunchtime. Partly just because I currently don't have any windows in here as well, because it's a garage. So I need to fix that at some point. But it's hard sitting in a dark room all day every day, and so I have to make a point of going outside, going for a walk. Sometimes I go and have lunch with my wife, who's probably in the house with the children, or maybe they've, I mean, obviously the whole world has exploded for the last 5 months, so they haven't really gone anywhere. But in theory, they could be out when things are a bit more normal. And so in those situations, I might try and do something like go for a walk or whatever, and try and. I used to swim quite a lot. It's harder with kids and lockdown and everything, but more recently, I've been slowly getting back into swimming in like an outdoor pool where you can kind of stay away from folks, and that helps. I tend to find like I can think a lot. I like swimming for like thinking through a hard problem quite often. So if I'm working on something in the morning that's challenging, I quite enjoy swimming because I can really think it through. It's quiet. It's almost like being in your own little isolation booth, right? You just all you've got to do is think. So I tend to do that, and then I swim a couple of times a week, and then I come back in the afternoon, and around that point, my like East Coast colleagues are starting to come online, so I might start getting messages and things might start picking up at that point. And I'll probably like switch tactics then from maybe working on something longer and harder. It depends on the scale of what I'm working on, right? But often I'll switch to something where I'm doing like maintenance or small pull requests or something that I need to work with somebody else on. And so maybe I'll send somebody a message when I get back in from lunch and say, should we meet in a video chat in half an hour and we can pair program through a problem, or, should we pick up the thing we were working on last time, or whatever. And that tends to go on for like a couple of hours. And then generally, I think partly just because I work in this team that's pretty distributed, I find that a lot of meetings happen late afternoon for me. And I think that's just to kind of, so that there's like an hour at the end of the day where California and Europe like overlap just slightly. And so a lot of meetings tend to be targeted for that time. Just so you can get as many people on a call as possible. So the end of my day tends to wrap up with meetings. And then, I normally leave my office between kind of 5:30, 6 o'clock, something like that, just because I tend to start later. And so, that's like generally like a pretty normal day for me, I would say.
That sounds very interesting. And I think you are very smart that you have that mentality of, okay, I actually need to leave the office for a while, because I think when we work remotely, it's very easy for us to just sit down and just keep at it on a problem or two, or just the next task, and then when you realize you haven't really left home or you haven't left your desk for a whole day. So it's good that you are doing that. And like you said, sometimes when I'm stuck on something, I tend to go for a run, and that helps me as well, because it's one of the things that you don't really need to pay much attention. You just have to run, which is the same thing for you when you are swimming. You just do it, and you can let your brain just munch over all the problems that you have, and usually you get the solutions for it. Do you have any sort of way to manage your time? Do you use like Trello boards or?
Yeah, so I use Todoist as like a to-do list manager, and that tends to be like I try and make sure everything goes on there. So I used to be like a big inbox zero, Google Inbox kind of person, right? I used to prefer that, but then they took away Google Inbox, which made me sad. And also I've gone from when I was in that R&D team, we were completely in control of our own IT. So we decided to go with the Google suite of tools for all our email and everything. And that's my preference. But now switching back to a large organization, I've kind of gone back to all the Microsoft tooling, and I just find it less, like I don't really like using Outlook to manage my time. I just kind of use that as maybe a place for calendar and email. But as a way of working out things I have to do, I like having something else. So I tend to use to-do lists. I've played around with like doing the Pomodoro technique and all that kind of stuff, but I think because because I'm kind of working with other people in different time zones, I need to be reasonably flexible to whatever's going on kind of at the time. And it's maybe slightly harder to predict, I've got these big blocks of time for doing this or that. Also just with having children and the interruptions that come with working from home with young children around and stuff. But yeah, I tend to mark things. I try and make sure that everything that goes on my to-do list has a deadline. Even if I know that I'm probably going to miss most of those and I'm going to defer them to the future, because I often find if I don't put a deadline, I'll forget about it and it'll drop to the bottom of the list, and then that's just that. But often the way that I tend to do things at the moment is I'm usually only working on one or two things at a time. They tend to be large chunks of work, and so each of the things I'm working on is probably a piece of open source software. And so we're using GitHub and GitHub issues and project boards and those kind of things within GitHub for managing individual things. So, the Dask community has like a maintenance project board, which you can find if you go to the Dask GitHub. And that just tends to be, we just have like a big column of, these are things that are like maintenance tasks, which are just the things that a contributor probably wouldn't do because they're a bit too specific to the project. And they're also a thing that nobody really wants to do, but we kind of need to do for the health of the project. So it'd be fixing some obscure bug, or doing something with the CI or documentation or those kind of things. So
that's
we
like
have this
that's like the issue that's on the page 20 something that no one wants to touch it then.
Yeah, so we tend to keep these on this list, and then in Dask, we have there's about 10 people, I think, that kind of are the core Dask maintenance team. And so, people do different things. Some people have like 1 day a week to work on Dask. For me, my default position is that I'm working on Dask, but occasionally I get asked to do other things. So I'm mostly working on Dask, but I get bursts of other stuff. Whereas other people are the other way around. Like they have been given 1 day a week, and they have to fit that in with all their other commitments. Some other people have there's somebody on the team, she's 50-50, but they do that in, they do like 2-week sprints in their company, and she'll do 2 sprints on and 2 sprints off. So basically once a month, she'll either flip to being fully Dask or flip to being not at all. And so this board is to try and manage all these people who are working in different ways, right? You've got 1 day a week people, you've got most of the week people, you've got on and off people. So like, how do you help people manage stuff? So we have this board, we have things people don't want to touch. And then we tend to, each week we meet on a Tuesday and assign things. Nobody just says, right, this week I'm going to try and do this, this, and this. And then they'll fit that in however they're going to fit that in the week. And then the next week they kind of come back and say, oh, I didn't manage to do that. So we tend to just have a couple of lists, just like things that need doing, things that we've said we're doing, and things that are done. And so we can kind of track through how things are going. So I tend to use that just because I'm working on that most of the time. But then I maintain my own to-do list as well of like all the other things I'm trying to think about.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not entirely a agile environment, but sort of is, because you still have all these things that you have to work, and then all the things that are still left to do.
Yeah, I think it's partly because in open source you don't have like a dedicated full-time team of developers. You might do if you're lucky, right? But you're probably gonna have this mix of people, especially on a large project like Dask, where we have people from multiple organizations that work on things. You can't enforce a thing. You can't say, right, we're going to do agile and we're going to do it this way, and this person's going to be the scrum master, and we're going to have a product owner here, and we're going to do a 2-week sprint, and here's all the ticket. And it's that's stepping too far into how somebody else's company is running. So we kind of have to just put everything up and just say, here's all the things. Can you try and do the things in whatever way fits in within your job? And so, I mean, in the team that I'm in Nvidia, which is called Rapids. Rapids is like this other open source set of GPU accelerated like data science tools. One of the things that we are rigid with in that is that we have releases every 6 weeks. We have like a code freeze time, and we have burn down, and we kind of have those principles from like an agile Scrum methodology. to kind of keep everybody on track. But it's hard because everybody's on different time zones. It doesn't necessarily work in the same way that you might have if you had a team of 10 developers, or if you're Spotify, or something where you've got stricter controls over how things are working.
Okay, makes sense. I told you before we started the talk, I want to keep this under 1 hour because Sunday is
so we
your
probably
family
do
day.
have. I probably can go until 3 at the latest.
All right,
but we probably have wrap up time as well. So.
But this is one question that I always ask the guests: is if you're looking at a 16-year-old Jacob, what is the one piece of advice that you would give him?
It's a good question. I think it's very easy to be scared of change, and I'm generally a person that's scared of change. But basically, every time I've made a big change, whether that's moving from an IT team to the R&D team, which was a big move, or leaving the organization completely, going to Nvidia is a big move. Those things, I always think it's good if you've been doing the same thing for a few years to have some kind of change, try and do something different, maybe move internally or swap around your role a bit or something like that. And that kind of is always really, really scary for me. And it took me a while to become comfortable with that. And I think I would maybe go back and say, as long as you try really hard and you're continually doing things, it's okay to change and do different things and try and learn different things. You don't have to set yourself. I think when I became a sysadmin, I was like, right, this is it. I'm on the sysadmin path and I'm going to do it forever. And then when an opportunity for change came up, it was scary, and I very nearly turned it down. And I feel like I've done that a couple of times. So yeah, I would definitely say that. I always think the whole university thing is a big thing. I do wonder, looking back, would I have done anything differently if I knew what I do now? And I think maybe I work with a bunch of people. I'm in a team with folks with PhDs in computer science and degrees in computer science, and other folks without degrees or with unrelated degrees, right, to the field. And it takes all of those kinds of people to build a successful software team, and that's something that I think I've had to come to terms with. And I've often felt a lot of imposter syndrome, I guess, with being well, I don't have a degree. Should I really be sat at this table? Should I really be here? And I think that's just always been a scary thing. And I made the decisions that I made, but I think it's kind of reinforced that you can take loads of different routes, and you don't have to have a computer science degree to be a software engineer, and you don't have to have those things to work for a large company. It's hard, right? Because a lot of companies, if they put out a job advert and they get 100 people apply, the easiest way to cut that list in half is to just filter by what degree people have.
Yeah.
And when you're hiring, it's just hard, right? You only have so many hours to interview people and go through job applications and stuff. And so a really quick first cut is to cut out everybody without a computer science degree if you have too many applicants. And that just makes things hard when you don't have one. So I always feel like every job that I've moved into is because I've taken a lot of time to get to know people, build up my network, and build up folks that kind of know me and know my skill set, and then I can apply for something and be more sure that I might get an interview because somebody's given me a tip off that they're looking for somebody similar to what you can do, and here's how you can we've talked a lot kind of offline about how to fill in job applications and interview processes and things recently.
And you gave me a lot of great tips.
I'm glad it's been useful for you. But I guess that's one thing that I've gone from being this person applying, frantically trying to cling on to this organization, being in a 30-day rolling contract, filling in all these job applications and probably doing a terrible job of it, through to being somebody that is trying to write a job advert and put it out, and then you get people apply and you have to go through and review all of those job applications. And then, once you've got your shortlist, you have to interview people. Sitting on that other side of the table, it's a whole different world. And it's really when you've not done that, it's just this massive revelation. All of a sudden, loads of things click into place, and it just makes you think like, oh no, every job application I've ever sent has been terrible because it's not what I want right now. I want other things. And so I would try and go back maybe and give myself some advice about, I I have like a very maybe pessimistic view on this, but when you're trying to hire someone, if you're in a team and somebody leaves, kind of, you're like, well, roughly we want that person back, but maybe we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about what are we missing as a team? What do we need? Are there any skills missing? Are there any like qualities missing from a kind of person we want in the team? And then you have to sit down in front of a blank page and be like, right, I've got to write a job advert to try and find this person. So what do I put in the different boxes? And so you go through and you write this kind of thing. And that takes a lot of effort. You might spend a couple of days trying to put together a good job advert if you're really serious about finding somebody like that's going to fit into your team. And then that probably goes to some HR department, and you might not hear anything for a month, especially in government organizations, right? These are super long processes.
Yeah.
So you write this job advert, it goes off somewhere, and then ages later, they're like, oh, we're going to put the advert out now. You're going to have to review applications on this date. And then on this date, you get sent like 30 applications for this job advert that you wrote 2 months ago. And you're like, probably busy at that point. Your attention has moved on to something else. And you're like, right, I just need to get through this list. I need to work out who to interview. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the job advert. I probably wrote a bullet point of like 8 things that I wanted. I'm just going to read each one and be like, as soon as I find something that ticks that bullet point, I'm going to like tick it. And then I'm going to go through these people and then be like, right, how many boxes did this person tick? And then you basically do the same in the interview, right? You're like, probably the day before you start interviewing, or maybe the week before you start interviewing, you're like, oh man, I've got to sit with somebody for an hour and ask them questions. What do I ask them? How do I figure out if they're the right person? And again, you go back to that job advert that you wrote because you put loads of effort into it. And you're like, well, I'm just going to ask them questions to answer these things that I wrote in the job advert. And so, in government, it was quite rigid. You had to like come up with your questions beforehand, and you had to give that to HR, and you had to only ask those questions and things. And it was very, it was very fair compared to maybe some other companies. But you kind of go through all this, and again, like writing a job application, reviewing job applications and interviewing people is like a chore, right? Like it's a hard task. All you want is a good person. You just want to find a good person, but you don't really want to do those things to go through that process. Or for, maybe there are people out there that enjoy these things, right? But for me, it was kind of like, I don't really want to do this. I'm excited about doing this. I'm excited about finding a cool person, but I don't really want to do all of the work that goes with it. And so every time somebody would write a job application where they'd basically taken the 4 or 8 bullet points that I'd written, and they'd written like a paragraph for each one where they were literally like, you said this, I once did that, and here's an example, and I'm quite good at it. And it was like, thank you so much. I don't have to dig through your job application to find that thing that I was looking for. You've literally just said, here's the thing, and you can just tick it off, and then you're fine. And maybe a lot of organizations have like scoring things. It's like, oh, I'm going to score you 1 to 5 on how well you tick this box and things. And so it's like, the folks that have gone out of their way to craft their application and their interview to your advert and your thing, it's just made me really rethink how I would apply for anything. And it's like, well, it feels weird initially if you write a job advert where you're like, well, they've written 4 bullet points, so I'm going to write 4 paragraphs, and they're going to be really the thing that they've said. It feels like you're being too direct, but you're really not. And being on the other side of the table, like I've learned, you're really not being too direct. You're doing them a favor, and you're helping them out because they're probably quite busy. And so I would go back and basically give myself a load of like job application and interviewing advice.
That's very good. And when you told me that, when you said that you should look what the advert is, then structure your CV for all the things that they're asking, I think ever since you told me that, I've been sort of preaching the same thing, saying, Jacob told me this, and it makes a lot of sense. You should do the same thing. And that bit, it's sort of your foot in the door, right? If you don't have that CS degree, you have to send out somehow. So either be doing conferences, meetups, your networking, but also craft your CV and your cover letter to the job that you want. I know that sometimes it's hard because sometimes you see some companies and you say, I would love to work for this company. And you put so much effort on that application and then you get rejected. And you'll be like, ah, man, okay, so next one, I'll just add all of it. But then looking back, and Eva, she mentioned that on her episode. She said, I only applied to companies that I wanted. So she had the time to craft her CV how she wanted. And that helped her a lot to get that foot in the door and start as a software web developer. The thing I'm most afraid of, and this might be really silly, but is this live coding interviews. Because I know how to write code. I'm not sure if I know how to write code well, but I know how to write code, and I know how to just, when I'm streaming, I can just stream and then talk about what I'm trying to do and stuff like that. And that comes up naturally after a while. But when you're in the interview and they give you this hacker rank challenge and you have to solve this thing, I was never very good at these kind of challenges. And unfortunately, that's one of the best way to test someone, right? Is give this challenge and then see how well they do. I guess the only way for you to do it is by practice.
Yeah, I think there's a guy on YouTube whose name I can't remember now, but he's got some videos. If you search for something like how to pass a Google job interview, because he's an ex-Google employee, and he's done a load of videos of like, here's what the questions are like and here's how the things are, right? And he basically just says, practice, 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 go on like Coder Dojo and like all these kind of websites and just keep doing these things, because you're right that it is the easiest way to test someone is to give them a test like this, but also it's like the worst way to test someone. It's like the lazy way to test someone, right? And I've always tried, when I've done job applications in the past, I always want to test somebody on something, but I tend not to do it in the interview. And so it'll either be like, can you prepare this in advance? Like because I worked in a multidisciplinary team, I've been involved in hiring more than just software developers. And one of the things I did was hiring a designer. I did a few rounds of hiring a designer. It took us a while to find one that we wanted. But seeing how design interviews go is like totally different to how a software interview would go, because a lot of it is around like, bring your portfolio with you and talk us through all of the things in your portfolio. Mm-hmm. And so it's like you're not putting somebody on the spot to do something. And so that was great. And then occasionally, a couple of things we did experiment with, which I would love to do more of, really, is we would take somebody, we'd have like a formal sit-down interview, but then be like, right, we're going to go to our office for an hour and we're going to work and you're going to hang out and help us and do a bit of work with us and see, and that would be a far better test rather than giving them like a fake exam question kind of problem. That would always be like a much better thing. And you're testing for things that are not, you're testing for like, can this person think on their feet? Can this person do this or do that? And that you do kind of open yourself up to like, people that are really good can do these things when you ask them to. People that are also very good at bullshitting can do these things when you ask them to. So you're kind of taking a chance there, right? Of like, you could potentially get the wrong kind of person in that. But I remember there's a book that we were a bit obsessed with when we started this group called Joy Inc., which is all about this company in the States that was kind of trying to redesign the way that companies work. It's a great like work book. But one of the things they were saying is that their preferred hiring technique is to basically pay somebody for a day's work and be like, our daily rate is X, we'll pay you for a day, come in and work, we'll give you a task, we want you to work through it. At the end, you'll come to lunch with us and hang out and we'll treat you like a contractor or a consultant for the day. And then at the end of the day, we'll see whether we like what you did. And if we like what you did, then you could stay and have a real job. If not, we'll give you a day's pay and we'll say, thank you very much. And that's the end of it. And so as an applicant, you're going to get a day's paid work at the very least. And so we tried doing some stuff a bit like that, and that was fun, and I would encourage more of that. And some companies do that, but I would, if you ever see on a job application or something that they do something like that, I think that would be an excellent way to apply for things. But it's, in terms of doing coding exercises, it's like I personally only, like, I write loads of different programming languages just out of necessity, for various different reasons. But Python is the only one that I can kind of write without any documentation open in front of me. And, I, for small things, I often write code without running it and write a test and let CI tell me whether it works or not. And it's taken me a long time to get to that point. But if I switch to JavaScript, which I write much less of, or Go or C++ or anything like that, I have to have documentation open. I have to copy and paste stuff. I have to Google, like, this function in Python, what is the JavaScript equivalent? Because I can't remember. Or, it's just stupid things like appending to a list. I can append to a list in Python easily, but JavaScript, I can never remember, even though I do it all the time, right? Yeah. And so at the beginning, I was like that for everything. Now I'm like that for everything except Python. And so that's fine. And I think, like, folks hiring people should accept and acknowledge that that's true, right? Like, maybe you're super comfortable in something, but, like, you're only going to be able to hire a senior developer or like a principal engineer or something by giving them a test without the internet or without, really, folks are going to need documentation. They're going to need to be able to look stuff up on Stack Overflow. They're going to be able, they're going to have to do these things. Yeah. And so, I'm really not a fan of coding exercises in interviews. And it's just a downside of the industry that they exist. And I think the only way to get around them is to practice. Again, I feel extremely lucky and privileged that I've never really had to do like any intense. I have done for job applications. I have done coding interviews like that. I've actually, I think the only couple of times I've done it, I either didn't get the job or turned it down, right? But everything I have done, I didn't have to. Like when I got my job at Nvidia, because I'd already been working on this open source project that they cared about, they were like, we're not going to do a technical interview because we've seen your work, we see you do this kind of stuff, we know we want you to do that kind of thing. They were more just testing my work ethic and ability to work as a team and all the kind of soft stuff that comes with being in an organization. And like the core values. Like, Nvidia cares lots about performance. And I think if often when you're doing stuff, you get a choice between performance or like it's easy to work on. And in open source, I'm always like, I'd much rather write code that's slower that anybody can contribute to. And, I know you shouldn't like copy and paste code and repeat yourself, but at the same time, if you try and make things too dry, then you're gonna like end up with all this indirection and things are gonna be really hard to work on. Yeah. So I'd much rather go more on the side of keeping things simple and a little bit slower. Whereas like Nvidia, as a company that cares a lot about hardware and making things go fast and benchmarking, they're much more on the side of, write some code. It doesn't matter if anybody can read it as long as it's faster than the code that used to exist. And that was kind of one of those things that they were asking me about. And I was honest with them in the interview, and they were like, okay, well, you need to make the right decisions at the right time. Like if you're working on low level code, then performance is the utmost thing. And how would you measure that? How would you profile code? And I think, that was the things they cared about, is they care about performance. And so they wanted to make sure that I could care about performance. Even though I was quite honest about the fact that I care less about performance and more about readability. But
I had a time before I started contributing to opsdroid, so it was that time between doing tutorials and start doing coding challenges, because I thought this might be a good way to learn. And then maybe it was a year or year and a half after I started contributing to opsdroid, I went back to see some of my coding challenges solutions, and I look at that and I'm like, did I really come up with this solution? Because it looks very good. I don't remember doing that. And that was just that experience of doing them. And I was doing maybe 5 to 10 challenges every day. And after a while, you just know how to read the problem and just get it working how the challenge does, but I also felt that great, I know how to beat this challenge, but I wanted to build projects and I had no idea how to build a project because I know how to play around with the language and stuff like that, but building a project is completely different. So I think following your suggestion of what you've read is paying someone for a day's work and just see if they can adapt to the team. I think if companies did that and they said we're not going to pay you, if you can come, I think lots of people, they would be more than happy to just give that a try as well, because yeah, then you can see as well how is it working in that environment, how do you work when you have to start with a new code base that you have no idea what's happening, and it might be a bit easier to assess someone then. Or I think maybe the other route is sending a coding challenge and say, okay, this is your challenge and or a problem, and you have a week or so to do it. It shouldn't take more than 3 hours or something like that. And then we book up another meeting and we'll talk about your solution and any problems you had and stuff like that. So then you are not put on the spot to just, because interviews are already stressful anyway. No matter, I think no matter how many interviews you do, they are always very stressful. And then when you know that you're being assessed, if you forget something basic, in the back of your head you have that little voice saying, "Oh man, you're crap. You're not going to get this. This is bad. This is terrible," and then you sort of start sabotaging yourself. So yeah, I think either the whole a week to do a challenge, or come work for one day and see how it is, and we'll see how you work. Might be like the best way to do it, but
Yeah, I think, I mean, giving somebody a week to do a challenge, the only downside to that as like an interviewer is you're like, oh, what if they get somebody else to do the challenge for them? But you can always overcome that in the interview, right? It's like, well, just get them to talk through the thing, get them to talk through the decisions they made. It's not, there is like things you have to think about, but it's not super hard to overcome those things, right?
yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely like a big fan of all of that. I mean, one thing, could go back to your question about what advice would I give to myself when I was younger, is one thing I struggle with a lot in interviews is when I get nervous, I breathe too much, right? And I start hyperventilating.
Mhm.
And it means I don't like get into like a full-on panic attack, but I get into like a position where I run out of breath. I'm like talking and I have to take breaths at weird times. And that like it like overrides my ability to think properly, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm getting myself like lack of oxygen and running out of what's going on. And something that I ended up learning a few years ago now is just a breathing exercise to like really oxygenate yourself in like a good, like to like a good appropriate level, and remembering to breathe. So I quite often before I have any kind of interview, I'll like I do this thing where I like breathe in for 4 seconds, hold my breath for 4 seconds, and breathe out for 2 seconds. And I just sit there kind of counting around and around. I do it before public speaking as well, right? Because I always do it if I get up on a stage in front of loads of people. Like I never mind doing this, right? Like I'm just talking to you on Zoom, and I don't really mind that there's like other people. But when you're stood up on a stage in front of 100 people or whatever, I end up running out of breath. And so before I'm doing it, I sit and do these breathing exercises, and I do them for interviews, because you can get yourself really overwhelmed. And it's funny sitting on the other side of the table, you see somebody come in, they're really nervous, and they get themselves in that state, and all you want to do is be like, it's okay, it's okay. All I like, before you've come into the room, I want you to come and work with me. I don't know who you are. I'm really hoping that you're like great and that you can come and work for me. And if you're not, then that's a shame. And maybe, hopefully you'll go and find something else that's good. But like, I'm generally rooting for you and I want you to do well. And I really don't like seeing people getting stressed and worked up in interviews. It's so, I try and do everything I can to like put people at ease and relax. And so I maybe go too far the other way, right? People come in, I try and make jokes and like put people at ease straight away, because interviews are horrible. They're just like a horrible necessary evil of getting a job, and it's such an unpleasant thing. but it just seems to be the way that everybody works it out. I guess that's one of the things I like about open source as well, is I've seen loads of people get jobs through their open source work because they're building something that somebody cares about, and they're like, well, we'll employ you to come and build that thing, or, oh, we like what you're doing here, why don't you come and do something similar for us, or whatever. And kind of putting yourself out there through open source, I think, is a great way of doing those things. But yeah, you said a minute ago about people would probably come and work for free for a day in order to go through that interview process, and I bet lots of people would. And open source is kind of like that, right? Like lots of people do work for free just to try and prove that they can do good things. But like everybody's time is valuable, and everybody should be paid for their time. And I think when you kind of when you're hiring, like I would hate to like try and get free work out of people. I would want, as a company with money, if you're putting money into hiring someone, because hiring costs money, you have to do job adverts and all that kind of stuff, and spend employee time. Spending a bit of money on some contracting hours is not, and I guess from a legal standpoint, I think it also means that the company owns whatever was produced that day rather than the person.
I guess you're right,
you could get into complications. It'd be a bit weird forcing them to like open source what they did on that day or something, right? Like is I don't know. I guess hackathons do that, but yeah, I'm much more of a fan of these things. It's partly why I didn't want to go to university and things. Is I don't really like exams. I don't really like tests. I don't really like interviews. I think they're all imperfect measures of things, and I much prefer to like get out and do stuff and just try and make friends with people and show them that I can do good things. And that's generally worked out for me so far.
Yeah, I think it definitely paid off, and it's because we've been talking for a while now, for a few years, and I've also seen how much you've progressed in your career, and even in your life, because you moved house, you have 2 babies now, so it's been really cool to see that side of you as well. And again, well, I don't want to take much more of your time, so thank you so much for the talk. I'm sure that a lot of people will get a lot of value from this talk, and a lot of good things. And
yeah, thank you.
If people would want to get in contact with you, what would be the best place to do so?
Twitter is generally the place that I'm at the most. I spend far too much time scrolling through Twitter. So yeah, if you have any questions or want to get in touch, tweet at me. I tend to be able to tweet back and things. I do have a website where I write up blog posts, or if I write up blogs, I tend, because I work on open source projects, those projects tend to have blogs. So I sometimes write on there, but I try and signpost everything from my website. I'm trying to take a bit of a leaf out of your what's your garden analogy?
Digital gardening. Yeah.
Digital garden. Yeah. Okay. So having everything linked from my website, I'm trying to do more of that. So you can find more about what I'm doing and working on things from my website that will link you off to loads of places. But yeah, if you want to chat to me, Twitter's the best.
Perfect. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a good Sunday.
Great. Thanks, Javier. See you later.